What's the real cost of a $700 apartment? Cheaper rent in these 12 cities often pairs with rising vacancies, weaker employers, and aging infrastructure, especially across the Rust Belt and the Deep South. Today's list isn't a flex, it's a caution sign. Here's the thing. Rents feel low where momentum lags. We'll group each stop by its core problem: vacancy waves, heat punishment, crime drag, or job stagnation, so you can spot the pattern anywhere you go next. By the end, you'll have a filter you can reuse before you ever book a U-Haul. Let's start where the mailbox names haven't caught up to the lease. Number 13. Tulsa. Tulsa. Okay, the discount with a vacancy echo. $1,300 for a one-bed sounds reasonable, until you wonder why the mailboxes still have no names. Here's the thing. Tulsa sells you that Plains bargain with a side of murals and new brew spots. The skyline stays modest, the cost stays low, and the chatter about arts keeps getting louder. But you also hear real noise about empty units. Not a blip, an echo. Landlords woo you with first-month breaks, free Wi-Fi, even a gym key. That's not charity, that's inventory talking. Vacancy has hovered in the double digits. Think roughly 12%. So concessions become the marketing plan. Crime sits higher than the national line in pockets, and some blocks feel underlit after dark. You'll get the discount, but you'll scout the street lamps before you sign. You move in, stream your shows on the free router, then realize the bulb 2 doors down has been dead for months. The building is fine, the block is the question. That's how vacancy feels when you live next to it. Quiet hallways and a half-full lot after 9 p.m. Reports keep flagging double-digit vacancy, crime above the baseline, and a job scene that's steady, not hot. So, what's the trade-off? Lower rent versus a thinner roster of employers and a car-first grid that stretches your day. You can win on housing, then pay in drive time and risk. Call it the vacancy echo. Cheap to enter, loud once you're inside. If the offer looks too open, it probably is, especially when the season adds its own bill in the next place. Number 12. Rochester. The vacancy epidemic meets winter tax. $1,300 to $1,500 for an average place sounds fair, until you learn the calendar has 2 seasons here, winter and construction. Here's the thing. This is a legacy city with real universities and healthcare anchors, so the bones are solid. You get the price break versus big coast metros and the institutional pull, but not the buzz of a hot hiring boom. The housing stock shows its age, and older blocks carry for rent signs longer than they should. Vacancy sits above the national mark. That means options, but not always the kind you want. Safety varies by block, so you scout the street before you sign, and then the cold hits. Heat bills jump. You swap tires, shovel out, and plan your day around plow timing. When the thaw starts, potholes bloom, lanes shift, your bus wait turns into a wind drill, and simple errands take longer. The cheap line item is rent. The sneaky ones are utilities, car repairs, and time. Property taxes take another bite, so the monthly win shrinks once you add the extras. Smart Asset shows average rent rising year over year and up sharply over 5 years, which chips at the bargain. Meanwhile, the job push into tech and healthcare feels awkward, like a tool that fits but slips. So what's the trade-off? Lower rent versus the winter bill, the car bill, and slower career lift. Call it vacancy plus winter tax. Great on paper, heavier in practice. Different climate next. Same question. Why are the keys cheap when the departures keep coming? Number 11. Shreveport. Stuck economy. Cheap keys. Low rent jumps off the page, but the story behind the price tells you more than the number. Here's the thing. Shreveport wore the uniform of a military and manufacturing hub for decades. That base is thinner now, and private sector growth lags. The rent looks great because demand fell faster than supply, and the market never caught its breath. But here's the twist. The streets show wear. Aging pipes, deep potholes, and long fixes signal tight budgets. Downtown gets a shiny cafe, then 2 blocks of papered windows. The vibe is start, stall, repeat. Crime runs higher than the national average in pockets, enough to shape perception and leasing decisions. Vacancy sits high, especially in older multifamily. Let that sink in. Plenty of keys, not enough takers. Reports peg rental vacancy around 1 in 5 units at times, a distress signal that lines up with population drift and thin job growth. The math tracks the headlines. Median income trails the nation, and that shapes what opens and what closes. You'll see the deal up front, a lease that looks like a used Honda payment. But the race cycle moves slow, and neighborhood stability wobbles. Savings on rent meet thinner wage growth, higher summer power bills, and fewer ladders to climb. That's the stagnation discount. Low rent as a trade for flat prospects. If you bring remote work, you bank the spread. If you need a local climb, the rungs are far apart. Now shift north a bit. Different playbook. Same question about momentum and whether the entry price masks training wheels on the local economy. Number 10. Akron. Here's the thing. Akron is a Midwest comeback in slow motion. You see new small firms pop up, plus steady seats in healthcare and education. That gives you a floor, not a trampoline. Rents read low by big metro standards, and the cost of living stays friendly. Median rent can sit around the high 600s in older data, and even with recent bumps toward the low thousands, it's still cheap next to peers. The promise is clear: cut your monthly burn and buy time. But here's the twist. The job scene is stable, not surging, and mid-skill ladders are thin. Older housing shows where. Some blocks have empties and the porch lights to match. You live by your car here. Insurance, fuel, and repairs turn into a second bill, and the city grid expects you to drive it. Think used Honda price for rent, but the engine is the job market. It starts, it goes, it doesn't win races. You're fine for errands, less fine for a fast climb. Vacancy shows up in older neighborhoods, roughly mid-single digits citywide, which means more options, not always better ones. Property crime runs higher than average, so you learn which blocks feel steady and which don't. Utilities nibble in winter, and insurance won't be shy. So what do you get? Low overhead and space to breathe. What do you lose? Pace. Rapid compounding is hard without a deep stack of mid-skill roles. The resume grows slow unless you bring your own ladder. Call it a recovery rental. If you arrive with a job or remote work, you bank the spread. If you need services and safe, easy errands, the next stop pushes that trade even harder. Number 9. Pine Bluff. Sidewalks optional, savings real. Rent so low you check twice and then watch your car budget balloon. Here's the thing. This is a small southern city where the sticker price on housing makes you grin, but basic services run thin. As the original video puts it, sidewalks are optional, and streetlights are rumor, which tells you how the public side of life feels after dark. With little transit, every errand turns into a drive, and every drive adds to the bill. The cheap part is the lease. The pricey part is everything you need to make that lease livable. But here's the twist. Hotspots of crime push safety to the front of your plan. The video frames the risk as severe, citing a violent crime rate far above the national average and noting a higher rate than Chicago, so locks, cameras, and tighter routines become part of the budget. Healthcare isn't right around the corner either, and trips for appointments can eat an afternoon. Cost of living lists put it low, and rent sits far under the state average. The video cites a median around $582 against Arkansas's roughly $1,067, which looks like a steal until you stack the extras. Jobs tend to cluster in government and medical, with fewer seats beyond that. A shrinking population down about 30% since 2000 per the video tracks with fewer openings and slower churn. So, what's the trade-off? If you work remote and keep a reliable car, it's workable. If you rely on local services, friction shows fast. Call it the infrastructure gap discount. Housing cheap, everything around it costs time. And if the bill here hides in services, the next stop hides it in the sky and on your utility meter. Number 8. Brownsville. Brownsville swaps potholes for sunburn. Different friction, same math. Cheap keys with a climate clause. Brownsville TX. Heat punishment, wallet relief. The rent is cool, the air is not. This border city sits by Mexico and the Gulf, with rock-bottom housing costs and a thin roster of high-wage industries. You get the lease you want and the paycheck you don't. Multiple lists rank it among the most affordable in America, and average rent can hover around the high 600s. The cost of living is among the lowest, but income sits well under national lines, so the cheap has context. But here's the twist. The heat index rules your day. Local chatter sums it up as a slow-cooked life. Hot, dramatic, relentless. Let that sink in. Your AC becomes a treadmill that never steps off. Noon errands turn into dawn runs, and sunset is your outdoor window. Rents stay deeply discounted by national standards. Utility bills don't. The thermostat slides up, and those kilowatts stack fast. You learn shade maps, time your walks, and only pick a top-floor unit if the insulation is real. Median household income runs lower than the US average, which means the margin for surprise costs is thin. So what's the trade-off? You save on rent, then spend on electricity, heat stress workarounds, and a career ladder with fewer rungs. Think budget plan pricing with roaming fees you can't dodge. Mini payoff: the heat tax, paid in kilowatts and in fewer local ladders up. Keep the calculator out because the next place posts a similar bargain on paper and forces you to ask why it's still available. Number 7. Decatur. Top of the affordability charts, bottom of momentum. Rents read like a throwback, and the line item looks easy. Here's the thing. On paper, the affordability index loves Decatur. Housing to income looks tidy in a spreadsheet, and the monthly nut drops fast. You get space, a yard, and a payment that feels like a basic used car note, not a luxury lease. The hook is real. You buy time, you buy quiet, you buy breathing room. But here's the twist. The job market moves slow, and the industrial legacy hangs over it. Source notes tie in slow job growth and youth outmigration, which signals a ceiling on momentum. Amenities run thinner than in larger metros, so your weekend plan repeats more than you'd like. That's not doom, it's drag. You can bank savings, yet career velocity stalls. Wage growth is muted, per the research, which means raises lag inflation and titles change at a crawl. Median household income sits at $49,682, well under the national mark, so the cheaper house pairs with a smaller paycheck. Let that sink in. The math feels like a discount store. Great sticker prices, fewer aisles. Affordability ranks high, median home values stay low, and costs behave. That's a win for fixed income and remote workers. Teachers, nurses, and folks with set pay can stretch dollars and dodge rent shocks. But if you need a stack of mid-skill roles to climb, the ladder has missing rungs. Mini payoff: static affordability. Amazing price, modest future upside. Next stop keeps the budget smile but asks what happens when your rent drops and your resume doesn't. Number 6. Battle Creek. Let's keep the math hat on and look at the next Midwest bargain that trades noise for stillness. Battle Creek, MI. Cheap rent, quiet resume. Here's the thing. This is a small Michigan market with real affordability. Median rent sits at $703, way under the US norm of $1,127. Median home value is about $138,764 versus a national $370,489. Let that sink in. You spend less on shelter and keep cash in your pocket. The employer list is stable but thin. Think healthcare, legacy food brands, a casino, and local services. It's steady, not stacked. But here's the twist. Commuter culture is common because bigger paychecks live down the road. Local wages lag. Median household income is $51,991, below the US average. That gap matters. Lower housing costs help, but a smaller paycheck means less room for surprise bills and slower savings even when rent is tame. Winter adds hidden costs: heat, tires, and a car that eats salt like a snack. The budget win shows up each month. The career lift waits its turn. You win monthly. You wait yearly for raises that just meet inflation. Affordability gets praise in national lists, and rent runs low versus regional peers. Yet wage growth stays slow. High-skill roles exist, but not in clusters. Clusters give you mentors and lateral moves. Thin markets ask for patience. So what's the trade-off? Works great if you bring remote work or a portable skill. You get quiet, space, and a bill that behaves. Tougher if you need a dense peer network to level up fast. Mini payoff: career quiet zone. Budget smiles, resume whispers. Now watch what happens when the value play starts firming and new leases inch upward. Number 5. Wichita. Let's move to a place where the discount still shows up, but the sign isn't hidden anymore. Wichita, KS. Affordable but not a secret anymore. It used to be the stealth deal. Now leases bump a few bucks each cycle while still reading cheap on your budget. Here's the thing. Wichita runs on aerospace and manufacturing, so the floor feels steady. The cost of living wins stack up. A recent smart asset study highlights its affordability among big cities, and average rent sits around $1,003. Family-friendly layout, simple commutes, and neighborhoods that don't demand a second job to afford. But here's the twist. Demand is rising as more people catch on. Vacancy has tightened, which usually means fewer concessions and quicker signings. That points to firming rents. Not a spike, a nudge. Paychecks here aren't coastal, so you notice the renewal creep. Car dependency stays the rule. You'll drive for work, school, and errands, and that means gas, insurance, and a mechanic you actually know by name. The bargain is real, but narrowing. New leases hint at the shift. That wow number still beats national, but it inches higher as units fill faster. Compared to truly distressed peers, Wichita's balance of jobs and price feels more durable, which explains the interest and the pressure. So what's the trade-off? Lock sooner and you ride the value curve. Wait and you play musical chairs. Think discount aisle with fewer boxes left. The price is good, the shelf isn't full. Mini payoff. Tight value. Cheap but firming, with a steadier job base than the caution sign cities. And if Wichita's pressure comes from more takers, the next stop asks a different question. Big stage, starter rent. What's the catch? Number 4. Cleveland. Here's the thing. Healthcare and education give you a floor here, and the arts aren't a brochure myth. You've got a museum that punches above its weight, a real theater district, live music, and the Hall of Fame halo. Winters are not cute, they're real, and they factor into your monthly math. But here's the twist. The city splits by blocks, not just zip codes. Some pockets surge with new leases and quick turnarounds, others lag with empties and safety concerns. The average rent smooths that out, which is why averages don't tell you much. Let that sink in. One street over, your deal becomes a "why is this still available?" rental. Rents were historically lower, but Smart Asset flags a 7.25% jump year over year, with 2025 average rent around $1,300 to $3. That hints at tightening. Certain areas spike, others stall. Crime varies by neighborhood, so you plan routes, check lighting, and ask about parking before you sign. So, what do? Treat it like a block-by-block audit. Visit at noon and at 10 p.m. Read the lease. Walk the block. Ask about heat, water, and noise. Micro-markets beat macro myths here. Due diligence pays, because the wrong pocket erases the savings you came for. Mini payoff. 2 Clevelands. Pick the right pocket and you win. Pick wrong and the math falls apart. If you're weighing culture and a starter rent, the next stop pushes a similar value, then asks how you feel about reading the police log before brunch. Number 3. Memphis. Let's stay on the big stage value theme and shift south to a river city that prices kind but asks for homework. Memphis TN. Low rent, high trade-offs. Music, barbecue, and a lease your wallet loves, until you review the blotter. Here's the thing. Memphis is a logistics hub with culture that travels well. Blues, ribs, river views, and rents that sit below the national big metro average. Median rent around $1,267 keeps the monthly hit sane, and the broader cost of living plays nice with a tight budget. Jobs cluster in transportation, warehousing, and distribution, which gives you a floor even if the ceiling isn't sky high. But here's the twist. Crime runs higher than national averages, according to broad measures, which affects how you pick a block, a parking spot, and a bedtime routine. Schools and infrastructure vary by zip, so a mile can change your week. Vacancy looks moderate, which means you'll find units, but the sweetest prices often come with louder trade-offs. You get value if you can navigate micro-risk, daytime tours and night drives. Ask about break-ins, floodlines, and heating costs. The rent is the headline. The context is the fine print. Rents bumped a little, about 2% year over year, yet still feel low versus peers, so the bargain holds if your tolerance does. Think used truck pricing with a solid engine and a few dents. It'll haul your budget, but you steer with care. Works for budget first movers who vet the commute and the block, less so if you want uniform schools and pristine streets. Mini payoff, risk-adjusted rent. If you like the price and can handle the diligence, you can make it work. Just know the next map draws the same lesson with a different skyline. Number 2. St. Louis. Let's test that same playbook on a place where the map changes by the mile. St. Louis MO, the split-screen city. The arch looks the same from both sides. The rents and risks don't. Here's the thing. This is a bi-state metro with real Medjed and logistics muscle. Yet the map plays favorites block by block. The cost of living runs low, and rents sit under national lines. As of April 2025, median rent was $1,120 versus $1,625.25. Let that sink in. The sticker price lures you in. The street reality decides if you stay. But here's the twist. Some areas give you a bargain with parks, small cafes, and a grocery you can walk to. Others show vacancy signs and safety flags, and that gap shows up fast after dark. Downtown adds another layer. Starts and stalls in the residential pipeline keep momentum choppy, which means specials pop up, vanish, then return. Your day changes by a mile. One side gets quiet blocks and steady leases, another means you plan routes and watch porches. Crime patterns tend to cluster by area, not blanket the map, so treat safety as a neighborhood check, not a citywide verdict. Do the basics. Tour at night, ask about lighting and parking, and read the lease line items for utilities and fees. Research backs the split screen, below national rents, uneven block-level outcomes, and a downtown that surges then idles. So, what's the trade-off? Strong cost control. If you tour twice, talk to neighbors, and don't rely on averages. Weak result if you skip the homework. Mini payoff. Split screen value. Choose right. The math works. Choose wrong. It backfires. And sometimes the price itself moves under your feet, which is where the next map gets interesting. Number 1. Columbia. Tomorrow Columbia plays a different game. Prices look friendly. Timing does the damage. Columbia. SC. Cheap today. Volatile tomorrow. Rent relief now until the growth spurt hits and resets the price floor. Here's the thing. Columbia is a state capital with a big university and military ties, so demand never fully sleeps. That mix keeps bodies in seats and leases active, but it also means the market can swing fast when a class graduates, a unit turns, or a cohort shows up with parents and deposits. But here's the twist. Recent jumps tell you volatility is real. Average rent was $1,504 in February 2025, up from $1,109 a year earlier, and way up from $1,013 in 2020 per smart asset. Let that sink in. You saved yesterday, you pay more today. A national housing shortage and tightening vacancy around 8% and drifting lower add pressure, so even a cheap market firms up. Summer adds its own tax. Heat pushes electric bills higher, and AC runs long hours that eat the cushion you thought you had. Near campus and job nodes, vacancy runs tighter, so specials fade first where you most want the commute. The cycle is baked in. Students out, new leases in, and the price meter resets with the calendar. National demand is rising. Vacancy nudges down, and renewal letters learn new numbers. Timing matters more than apps. So, what's the trade-off? Good for short-term savings if you lock a solid term. Risky for long holds without a fixed lease, because renewals bite. Think discount aisle, with a moving price tag. Mini payoff, volatility discount. You save if you time it, you pay if you don't. And that brings us to the bigger lens on why cheap keeps asking for a trade. So use the model, not the myth. Conclusion. Cheap rent clusters where vacancy, heat, crime, or stalled jobs do the heavy lifting. Your savings are a trade, not a gift. And with new apartment construction projected to drop sharply, CoStar notes roughly a 42% pullback, even cheap markets can tighten fast. Comment yes or nope with the city you'd risk for the savings. Subscribe because someday you'll want to escape. Use the filter before you move. Vacancy echo for empty halls. Heat tax for kilowatts. Stagnation discount for flat paychecks. Infrastructure gap for long drives and thin services. Trust me, run the model first, then book the U-Haul.